I just tried to go on my phone while waiting for them to be done before realizing you're on my phone. So I can't do that. Hello angels, I'm Taylor. Welcome back to this channel if you have watched before. Today we're going to try something a little bit different. I'm no stranger to reading blogs, obviously. This one is an idea that sort of came to me a while ago and it's not something I've seen anyone do before. So I'm going to give that a whirl. Behind the scenes secret, I guess, but I actually do film these last. So it's basically done and I am quite proud of it, quite excited to have it out there. I feel like if you know one thing about me based on my online presence, it's that I am a millennial. It's true. What gave it away was it like my entire demeanor, the fact that I mention I'm 30 every 2 seconds. But I am also someone who has a family, and the nature of how families work is that there are people I'm related to who are from different generations than myself. Crazy, I know. So ages ago when I was home for Christmas in December, that's how long I've been sitting on this idea, I thought it would be really interesting to take a little bit of a survey about what like certain family members of mine were reading without them knowing. I'd just sort of like sneak into their bedrooms, have a look at their bedroom table, like, oh, what you reading there? And anyway, I made a note of that and that helped me choose the 3 books you're going to see me reading in this vlog. The first one is the book my youngest sister was reading. She is 13 years younger than me. She is a member of Gen Z, believe it or not. And also, believe it or not, she was reading Lola in the Mirror by Trent Dalton. I personally was not that surprised by this. My sister does have quite literary tastes, I have noticed, when I've gone into her room and perused the bookshelves before. You'll find stuff like Bunny in there, you'll find stuff like The Secret History in there, Sally Rooney. And so finding this book in there with a bookmark in it on the bedside table was not that much of a surprise. If you're watching from overseas for some reason and you may not know, Trent Dalton is a really popular author in Australia. All his books end up being bestsellers. He writes in quite a literary way, but he does that in a way that is really accessible. He's a really popular pick for universities to study, for schools to study, for book clubs. His best known book, Boy Swallows Universe, was adapted into a Netflix series recently. You may have seen that. Oh, I'm taking my hair out. Is anyone else's hair too heavy for claw clips? It's a constant struggle for me personally. But yeah, I had never read any of his other books. I do know though that they tend to focus on people from a lower socioeconomic class. We love to see it. Also mostly set in Brisbane, which is where I am from. So that definitely made me want to give it a try as well. I could be mistaken, but I do think a lot of his work has a magical realism element to it as well, which I think is another reason why his stuff has been so popular. It does have like a pretty wide like cross market appeal, I would say. What I know about Lola in the Mirror going in is not that much. I have deliberately sort of kept myself away from any discussion of it. I did read the back of it though, just to sort of, give myself some kind of idea of what I was getting into. It is set in Brisbane. It is set on the south side, best side, and that makes sense based on what I know from his other works. It is where I am from, but it definitely is not the fancy side of town by any means. And I'm assuming homelessness is going to be a big focus of the book. I could tell just from reading the synopsis, it focuses on a teenage girl and her mother. They live in a van sort of on the margins of society in South Brisbane. They're on the run from something, I don't know what. It does make it sound like there's going to be issues within kind of organised crime and drug trafficking that they're going to have to deal with. Kind of seems like it could be a really beautiful magical realism, but it also could be extremely heavy. Probably both. Let's be honest, it's probably both. There is also the possibility it could be historical fiction. I do know Boy Swallows Universe was set in like the 70s or the 80s. Not sure whether this book is going to take place at a similar time or whether it's going to be contemporary? We will find out. Then the next book I'm going to read is our Gen X pick. It is a book that has been read and enjoyed by both of my parents. I do have young parents. I do have Gen X parents. And my mum actually gave me her copy of this book to read when I was home for Christmas. And that is Scrublands by Chris Hammer. And what I know going into this book is basically nothing. Really not much at all. First impressions, it's giving dad book cover. It's giving Baldacci. It's giving James Patterson with the font. It's giving dad book. And I do feel quite an amount of trepidation going in. I'm not going to lie to you. I did start the year off with 2 Australian crime thrillers back to back, and I'm just a little bit burnt out on that at the moment. I'm going to do my best though. I'm going to do my best to not let that colour this reading experience as much as I can. This book is about a journalist visiting a small drought-affected Australian town to write like a piece a year on from a mass shooting that occurred there. A priest who was really well liked in the community basically just opened fire on his congregation, confusing everyone, just seemed to be no reason for it. And, you know, basically I guess he's going to be roped into solving that mystery while he's in town, just trying to have a nice cruisy feel good story segment. And of course the back of the book says he's wrestling with his own demons because of course he is. And the final book I am going to read is the book my grandfather was reading last time I saw him. He is a boomer, and I am cheating a little bit with this one. It was a book I had bought for him that I did also want to read. I prefer to think of it as I just got lucky, like I just timed it really well, because there were a couple of months in between me purchasing him the book, about a month I guess, between me purchasing him the book and then me seeing him read it. So really I just manifested this reading experience for myself. But that book is going to be Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. A shitty little paperback version, not the big floppy delicious paperback. I bought him. My favorite book format probably. Obviously this is the one I'm feeling most confident about because I do trust my own judgment in choosing books for myself for the most part, and I trust his judgment in knowing what's a good book as well. He's the one that taught me how to do that really. And I know I just said I was burnt out on thrillers, but this is a thriller with a bit of like a speculative twist on it. It is a time travel story as much as it is like a straightforward murder mystery story, and I tend to enjoy time travel stories because I'm really impressed by the level of plotting that needs to go into one to be able to pull it off. Mysteries, thrillers, the plotting in those has to be so tight anyway, and I feel like combining it with time travel, you're just making it that much harder for yourself. Like I would not have the balls to do that personally, so I really hope Gillian McAllister is capable of that. I have high hopes for this one. I think we should just get stuck into it. I will provide you more like context around like what's actually happening in the book once I'm actually reading them. We're going to start off with Lola in the Mirror, purely just due to timing. My sisters were actually in town while I was reading it. You may have noticed my bracelets for the Taylor Swift concert. Her show's in Melbourne. Did my best to get that one read during that time. Yeah, there is going to be a Taylor Swift cameo in this video, and that's not clickbait. So yeah, let's see which generation has the best taste in books. Gen Z, Gen X, Boomer, according to me, your friendly local neighborhood millennial. updates. My sisters have been and gone. Melbourne City has returned to normal. The chaos is over. Would you like to see some of my friendship bracelets though? I think you would. I have one that says Starlight, which is not like a favourite song to be honest, but like look at the little stars. And one that says Melb Night 1, honestly, got to. One that says Never Grow Up with the like Speak Now purple. I thought that was cute. And Marjorie, which is also our dog's name, which is so cute. And it's got the little hearts and it's the same colours as she wears during the Evermore set. Like, isn't that so cute? And I just finished Lola in the Mirror, like literally 5 seconds before turning this on. So it's time to see how Gen Z fared in this little contest. Controversially, I am gonna give this 3 stars. 3 of these little stars. This book has an insanely high rating on Goodreads. It's like a 4.4. Inconceivable. And it just didn't hit quite there for me, I'm sorry to say. Trent Dalton's clearly like a really good writer, right? There's like no doubt about that. Prose beautiful, prose stunning. Brisbane representation, we love to see it. That was the part about it I really liked, because there were parts about it that I really liked. Trent Dalton just writes about Brisbane with such love and such care. It's like the scene in Lady Bird where the nun at her school tells her she writes about Sacramento, and it shows that she actually really loves it. That's what it's like. And I don't know if it would hit quite as hard if you're not from there, but like people that are from London and New York and Sydney and stuff get to have books written with references that only locals get. So like, why not us? Why does it have to be, you know, specific references to the same places all the time? So that I really liked. And I also really liked the types of people this book decided to focus on. I haven't read any of Trent Dalton's other books, but I do know Boy Swallows Universe, the most famous one, is a historical fiction. And I couldn't quite tell if this was going to be historical fiction going in, but it's definitely contemporary based on the references and just the dates that are given. And there's a lot in this book about how Brisbane gearing up to host the Olympics in 2032 is affecting the homeless population. Majority of the characters in this book are homeless or houseless, they like to say, because they do have a home. Our main character grows up in a junkyard in West End, which is Brisbane's coolest neighbourhood in my opinion. She grows up in a junkyard there in a community of houseless people who live together in this junkyard. This was a really beautiful look at a kind of community that we don't see represented a lot in any kind of media, whether that's fiction or non-fiction. They're a group of people we just don't get to hear from very much. So I think Trent Dalton's decision to focus the entire story about someone whose young life has been shaped by the fact that they are homeless is really important. It's a really interesting story to tell. It gives a voice to a group of people that's normally silenced. But for all the things I did like, there were other things that I didn't like in equal measure, hence the middle of the road kind of rating. I mean, first of all, the pacing of this book was just all over the shop. It is long. I listened to this on audio and it was a slog. The first 300 or so pages, you know, they just kind of plod along. Stuff happening, but a really long stretch in between of just day-to-day interactions of people. And then sort of the last 150 or so pages, it kind of turns into a different sort of book. It's very action-packed for the last 150 or so pages, not the direction I was expecting it to go in at all. And it was making me anxious, but not in a way that I was like anxious to find out what happened, in a way that I was getting nervous that we couldn't possibly answer any of the plot points that had been set up in like a satisfying way. And hats off to Trent Dalton, he kind of did, but I didn't enjoy the feeling. There's an entire love story plot that I feel was not needed. If you've seen my worst books of the year video, you know how I feel about a plot where the answer to a disadvantaged girl's problems is that she meets a rich guy and that fixes it. Absolutely not. Absolutely never. I really, really could have done without that. Not only is, as I've said previously, not only is that plot kind of offensive, but it was also kind of just like insta-lovey. And I get that the main character is a teenager, but she's also supposed to be like savvy and street smart and jaded, and I just don't think she would go all in with someone that easily, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, last thing, I promise. Last thing about the actual like story that annoyed me is there's two framing narratives, right? There's one that's kind of interspersed throughout the book and it runs the whole way through, and I kind of like that one. It's about our main character. She has this imaginary sort of world she goes into to deal with the harsh reality of her life. And it's all about her imagining in the future, when she's a famous artist, there's going to be this posh guy leading a tour through the Met of a collection of her art and sort of narrating all the pieces, all the sketches that she's done. And that kind of breaks up the chapters of the book, and I actually quite liked that. Then there's like the framing narrative that gives the book its name. Lola in the Mirror is this spirit guide version of herself, maybe, that she talks to in this cracked mirror that she has, and that is kind of used to break up important points in the story as well. And I was kind of like, pick one. Go with the artist thing, give this book a different name, or just use the mirror thing. Like, just pick one. It was a bit much. As I said, I listened to this book on audio, and I do think perhaps my enjoyment of it may have been raised a little bit, like a half or a 3/4 of a star or so if I had read the physical copy. Do get the pictures, the sketches, the paintings in the physical copy. And also, would it have killed them to give a pronunciation guide to the girl reading the audiobook so she wasn't mispronouncing like all the Brisbane suburb names? It was really annoying. Like, I know that's just a personal thing, but like, come on. Or at least get someone from there to like narrate the book. I think it was Harbour Audio. I guess they just don't care. So yeah, that is our first book done. Gen Z is exiting the competition with 3 stars. Can any of the other generations beat it? Let's find out. I'll leave you for now, and I'll be back when I have made a bit of progress on Scrublands by Chris Hammer. I'm not gonna lie to you, I am nervous. She's also very chunky, so not a lot of motivation, but we'll see how we go. Gang, it is Friday night. I am getting ready to go out. I just got off work and now I'm going out with my friend Hannah and her family to see the world's premiere, The Smiths cover band. Perfect timing, considering we're in the Gen X part of our journey. I could not have planned it better myself, because I'm the one who planned it and I planned it perfectly. So I will try to get some concert footage put in here for your enjoyment. Obviously, like, copyright infringements notwithstanding, I have enough hard work to do to make the Taylor Swift part of this YouTube appropriate. I actually wasn't going to film this at all. I just didn't want to not have a check-in with you before I hard cut to some guys pretending to be Morrissey and Johnny Marr on stage. I felt like that would have been confusing. But yeah, I'm only like 80 pages into Scrublands, so I don't really have that much to say. And what I do have to say, I feel like is not incredibly positive. I really, really think I am just like Australian mystery thrillered out at this point of the year. The first 2 books I read this year were also, you know, very, very similar in plot, very similar in tone. One of those was quite good. The other one I did not like. So I'm kind of just over reading about white Australian men in their 40s in rural towns. Like, I'm kind of over it. And that's not my parents' fault, obviously. Like, they couldn't have known that, like, 1, I was going to be spying on what they were reading and jotting it down, and 2, that I was going to unwrap a Jane Harper book in my wrapped up for January. Like, who could have predicted that? They don't even know that's a thing. So yeah, I'm not having the best time. The main character, the guy we're following in this one, is called Martin something. I actually can't remember what his full name is. Is it important? Probably not. He is a journalist. He canonically writes for Fairfax Media. He canonically works for the Sydney Morning Herald in this book, which I was surprised by. I did not think like a real newspaper would be cool with someone writing a book, pretending to be one of their journalists and maybe like portraying that person and their techniques and stuff in like questionable ways. But I looked it up, and Chris Hammer, the author, used to be a journalist, so he probably has like the street cred to get away with it. I actually started suspecting Chris Hammer was a journalist because Martin, the main guy, has a kind of like PTSD. He has a bunch of flashbacks to like, he calls it like his time in the Middle East. And just with everything going on at the moment, the way that is being presented does not feel great. The stuff he's talking about doing, the people he's talking about, oh my god, they're setting power like rising like smoke. The people he's talking about, you know, working with over there to rescue him from situations, not really the people I would want to be siding with or working with. And yeah, this book was written in like 2019, but that's not really an excuse. I think people were aware of these issues long before then. I don't know, it just feels very much like a book Australian dads would read. And I guess that makes sense because my Australian dad did read it. That's why we have it. I definitely am not live, laugh, loving at this moment. I do not think I was the intended audience this book had in mind, which is fine. Like, not every book needs to be for me or for the demographics I belong to, but that is going to dampen my enjoyment of it, I think. Yeah, but in terms of the actual story, not that much to report at the moment. I'm only 80 pages in. We're kind of getting introduced to the town, the people that live in this small drought-affected town. Our guy Martin is there to follow up on a mass shooting that occurred there a year ago. He's writing a story that's kind of like a year on. How are things getting on? How are the town, you know, making sense of that trauma and getting on with their lives and surviving? And it kind of seems like they're not doing that very well. It seems like it's definitely going to be one of those stories where he's kind of wandered into a mystery that he's going to sort of unfold while doing his job rather than being like a detective sent there to solve a crime, which is very Gen X Australian dad book, to be honest. The actual basis of the mystery itself, though, is quite intriguing. Basically, one day, this really young, like charismatic priest that they had in the town, who everyone really liked, just like opened fire on the congregation. Like, it's really intense. The big question, obviously, in everyone's mind is why. The prologue at the start of the book is like really specific about people who were shot and their relationship to other people in the town. We see the shooting in the prologue, and it's definitely getting us to pay attention to specific things. So I'm assuming those are going to end up being like clues further down the line. But yeah, 80 pages in, we did not have a lot to go on just yet, which is really frustrating because I do feel like there is a good, you know, there's a good mystery story in there somewhere. I'm just not sure if we're going to get that, to my satisfaction. I feel like we could be further along into that part of it by now. This book is nearly 500 pages long, and I don't know why. 350 to 400 for these kind of books is like the sweet spot. Okay, well, I'm gonna brush my hair out, then I'm gonna head off. I've downloaded the ebook onto the Libby app on my phone. I will try to read a bit more while I'm on the tram, even though I'm not feeling particularly inspired to do that. I will soldier on for the sake of the experiment. Fingers crossed when I check in with you tomorrow, things have improved. Good morning. I'm not gonna lie, it's been a full day since I last checked in with you, and I'm gonna keep this brief because holding my phone up like this is not easy. Concert was great. Concert was amazing. I had the best time. I was super hungover yesterday though, which in a way was good because it means I got a bunch of reading done. And unfortunately, at about 70% of the way through, I am sorry to say, I'm still not having a great time. Really not enjoying myself. Honestly, I probably would have DNF by now if there weren't like a few things keeping me invested. One is just that I am interested. I am compelled to find out what the answer is behind all of this. The actual mystery part of the book is pretty well constructed, I would say, and it touches on, you know, issues in Australia that have been quite politically relevant over the past few years, specifically around like landmark court cases like the Royal Commission we had into CSA, particularly within like religious institutions, and also cases we've had recently around the cover-up of war crimes in Afghanistan. Both those things sort of play into the mystery in this book without giving too much away. And I do think that's one reason why the author being a journalist is actually useful, right? Like, he is someone who would have, you know, maybe a greater understanding, more background knowledge on these things than someone trying to create a story around these issues from the outside looking in, if that makes sense. But that is kind of where my positive feelings about the book end, to be honest. I do not jive with the main character, Martin, at all. I don't really like him. I don't really understand why he does any of the things he does. I don't think he's that good of a journalist. He is very fucking reckless. If I may say so. And I also just am not, ow, this is really hurting my wrist. I'm also just really not jiving. One, with the way women are described in this book in general. They're all either pretty or fat, but not both. Never both. How about we just describe them without assigning value based on how attracted to them the main character is? Like, that seems not important. And also, there seems to be a plot point where false R-word allegations are gonna be a plot point. Like, it's gonna be proven to be the allegations were false, and I just don't think that is a narrative that we need to be perpetuating. Like, that's not a thing. Like, statistically, that is not a thing. So those things are making it quite hard to get through, to be honest. And also the fact that it's just so long. And that's kind of where I have a problem with the author being a journalist. I feel like he describes every scene the main character walks into, like every setting, as if he's like setting the scene for like a long form article. And he does that every chapter. Like, he does that every scene change, and it's driving me batty. Like, I do not need to read another lengthy description of the town square. I feel like the main street. I feel like I'm more familiar with the main street of this town, this fictional town, now than I am with like my own apartment. I'm like 70% of the way through. I think I'm probably gonna knock it over today. Definitely feeling like this one is gonna come out the loser of this video. I'm done. I'm finished, and yeah, F this book, man. I don't really have that much more to say, that much more to add on from what I said at the 70% mark. I'm kind of just happy to see the back of this chunky boy, to be honest. I will be at my parents' house in a few weeks for my cousin's wedding, and they can definitely take this back. I will say the R word false allegation story did end up getting resolved, and it wasn't a false allegation, it was true. So tick for that, I guess. Also tick for, there were no plot holes. Plot extremely well constructed. No notes about that. Disturbing in some parts, but fine. Comes with the territory, right? The treatment of women, I just can't. Even though the false allegations thing got cleared up, there was still this other part where it was like, women kind of do though, like, in an unrelated thing, it was like, they kind of do be lying though, am I right? And I'm just not very inspired by like the like young independent single mum that is like the heart and soul of the book, ending up with this, like, she's like in her 20s ending up with some like washed up journalist in his 40s. Like, no thanks, that's just a bit of like a fantasy on the author's part. I think they think the Wattpad girlies are out here writing real person self-insert fan fiction. This is the real offender. But yeah, I hated all of that. Just kind of hated being in that guy's head. I found him really annoying. I found the book way too long, and it was so effing corny. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it literally was giving the end of Cinderella's story when the drought finally breaks and it starts raining. Like, be serious. So I'm giving it 2 stars. And I'm gonna stop filming this portion of the video before I get any meaner, before I get any ruder, because obviously, yeah, my parents they both did like this book, and they gave me their copy to read, and now I'm just on here trashing it and talking about what a terrible time I had. It's not for me. It's for dads. It's for your dad. Not something I would normally pick up, and I stand by that. I'm gonna make dinner, probably take a bit of a break from reading, to be honest. That has been a bit of a slog. But if I am feeling up to it later, I may start on Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister, the last book for this video. Not gonna lie, I was kind of saving it. Is the only book on here that I am kind of genuinely excited about. We can only go up from here, surely. The crickets tonight are loud. The lighting tonight is terrible, but I just need to let you know that I finished Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister, and it is, I believe, chef's kiss perfect. There's no footage for this part of the video because I read the book so fast that I didn't film anything. I also just have been super busy because I work in university admissions, and it's like it's the week that enrollments close, and it's crazy, and we're all working 6 days a week. But this has been the only thing holding me down. This has been the only thing keeping me going. Just knowing that at lunchtime I have Wrong Place, Wrong Time. I love her so much. This book follows Jen. She is our main character. She's living in the north of England. She's in her 40s. She has a very chill, very handsome husband, and a very smart, very funny teenage son. And then one night when our story begins, Jen sees her teenage son murder someone, like right in front of her. She just stabs this guy and the guy dies. And she's like, well, what has transpired here? Because that is not, his name is Todd. She's like, that is not the Todd I know. That is not the kid I raised, the kid I love. She goes to bed that night and she is perplexed, right? She's like, I just don't understand how we got here. And then she wakes up the next morning, still confused, still doesn't realize how they got here. She stumbles out of her bedroom and she sees Todd. And she's like, wait a second, aren't you like the lockup? Like, you tried to kill someone. I saw you get arrested. And he's like, Mum, what are you talking about? You are crazy right now. And slowly, Jen starts to realize every day she wakes up, it's the day before. She's going back and back and back. She's like, oh my God, I am in a time loop. I am in a time loop story. Obviously, I need to work something out. Obviously, I need to work out why my son committed this murder. How did we get here? And that sounds like, you know, a very typical like Groundhog Day time loop story, but it ends up being so much more than that. Like, that's the great part. Like, I feel in most stories like this, like Groundhog Day example, the time loop is that it's like the same day repeating over and over again. But because Jen keeps going like back in time all the time as the story progresses, there's no sense of like consistency with what she's experiencing, right? Like, she will manage to explain what's going on to someone, like her husband, or she ends up getting in contact with this like professor that studies time travel and time loops, and she will get them to believe her. She'll like prove that, you know, this is happening and she has knowledge of the future and this is the past or whatever. She will get them to believe her. Then when everyone goes to sleep that night, next time she sees them, they won't know that because it's going to be even further in the past. And oh my God, it's just so good in terms of like forcing the main character to get into like outside of the box situations to try to solve the mystery. As we saw in the book before this, I've been getting so burnt out on like generic thrillers. It was really nice to have one where, you know, that was kind of like a science fiction, like a speculative twist on it. And, you know, it was also just a refreshing change of pace after the last two books to read a book where stuff happens in the first 150 pages. That was nice too. And ultimately, this was just a really beautiful story, a really interesting way to explore the fact that, you know, how can we ever really know the people we love? How much have seemingly unremarkable moments in our past cause us to be on the trajectory that we're on today? It's mind-boggling to think about. And I am such a harsh critic that I'm sitting here trying to think of reasons not to give it 5 stars when obviously that's what it deserves. Like, let's just go ahead. Let's just give it 5 stars. I loved it. Like, I was not bored for a single moment. There was a preview of Gillian McAllister's new book in the back, and I immediately opened up Goodreads and clicked want to read because she made me want to read it with the great writing she did in this book. And that's the win that we're gonna leave this video on, and I'm really happy. I'm really happy that I got the opportunity to read such a great book by doing this little experiment. The boomers won. It's just like real life. I'm just kidding. But I think there were, in terms of the whole generation thing, I think there were some interesting takeaways. This was a really nuanced, more explorative book, I want to say, than maybe you would assume would be picked up by an older person. And I think there's also this like perception that young people don't read, or they don't read things worth paying attention to. And I think Lola in the Mirror proves that that is not the case. I mean, I think a lot of the book content on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and things like that has already proved that is not the case. But anyway, it's just, you're telling me young people don't read, or they don't read things with like literary merit? That's not true.
Actually, no, that's not the truth, Ellen.
And we learned that Chris Hammer kind of sucks, and I don't want to read I don't want to read any of his other books. There's always going to be a couple of shitty outliers. But yeah, this was interesting. I had fun doing it for the most part. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts are. If you've read any other Gillian McAllister books in particular, let me know which ones you think are worth reading. You can do that down in the comments. You can also subscribe if you would like to stick around and see the videos that are coming out next. One is a pretty hard-hitting investigation, if I do say so myself, into who wrote this, who wrote Argyle, the novelization of the movie. Some pretty crazy conspiracy theories swirling around that. One in particular that I would like to explore. And also a video where I will be reading TikTok's most mentioned books. So that's probably going to be a fun one that might actually kill me. So if you'd like to see that, if you would like to see me suffer, please stick around and join in. But otherwise, you don't have to do anything. Just continue being your magical selves. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye.